Welcome everybody to Redd Foxx. And today we are on Fun Fact Friday. Very excited to talk about one of my all-time favorite characters and yours. I can already guarantee it because anytime I've seen a poll up, he's always one of the top 2 friends of Fred Sanford and someone we would all love to hang out with. And today it is on Don Bexley. I almost called him Bubba Bexley, but Don Bexley. We are going to have so many facts about him, history. Certain people will cover more in depth. They have great history. They have great stuff where it's real interesting to hear some of the things and how they got to where they were at. Sometimes if it's just characters in the show, like if we did just a Bubba Bexley, it's going to be a little shorter video. So today we will cover as much as I can on stuff that I found that I hope is new to you and interesting. If there's anything I leave out, please comment below. And thank you to everyone who continues to join our community and subscribe. Let's continue to make it grow. You guys are awesome. And just thanks a lot. And I love how you guys always have funny comments on the polls, on the quizzes. Yeah, so it's good. So let's get to fun facts on Don Bexley. Bubba, as we all know him as. It was funny. Originally, I like to try to keep with people that are in the time. We're in season 1. So I was like, do we do it on someone like, a different character? And I've hit up all the main ones. I go, you know what? Bubba's right around the corner. Let's get to Bubba. Everyone, like I said, loves Bubba. Born March 10th, 1910. So if you think about that and you know when the show debuted in the early 70s, that would mean Don Bexley was 62 when he made his debut as Bubba. And what's funny is when I look at it, I don't think he looks 62. He doesn't. To me, if I would have had to guess the age, I would have thought, I know they added with this, coloring gray, but with Fred and even Grady for sure, I thought Grady was the oldest of all of them. And Bubba has really good looking face and he's young looking, but he was 62 on his debut of the show, unlike the other guys who were in their late 40s. Next one, born in, now this is funny, there's 2 places, they don't know the exact place of birth. It's either Jamestown, Virginia, or Detroit, Michigan. I would rather be from Detroit, Michigan, but Jamestown, we know it's one of the founding cities of the country, but Detroit, Michigan just sounds cool, and a lot of great R&B and other people have come from that. His father was a Bible scholar and a teacher. And it's great when you see Bubba and other things like he's a minister or something, because I could so see that happening. And he was a teacher. His mother was a classical vocalist. So she was a great singer with classical music. And we see that come into play. Let's look at what happened with Bubba as he got through his young career. Don Bexley was an orchestra director. So early in his career, he was an orchestra director. He was also a singer, a dancer. Now, it's great to hear that we go, like we really didn't think that a guy who's in his 60s starting in Sanford and Son, we've already seen him sing. Man, he sings so well. I love hearing him sing. We know he can play. We know musical instruments in the Gong Show. We've seen him where he can sing and dance with Bubba King, or Bubba King. It's BB, right? Did I get that right, Fred? One of my favorite episodes with Bubba. We'll cover that soon. But with BB King, where he's singing, "Hey to see the," so good. Bubba's voice is just something where when you hear it, man, it's so upbeat and uplifting. So we knew he could sing and dance and play musical instruments. Several times we see him do the things such as BB King, The Gong Show. Remember the episode with The Gong Show? That one's really good where he can dance and he's playing the instrument. He was a stand-up comedian. That's something where when you look at it, I could see him up there on stage, cracking the jokes. We know he's funny. We know he can stand in front of a live audience. But comedian, yeah, I didn't really get to see a lot of that. I would love to hear if anyone knows how we can find a spot, if he ever has any records or if there's any things out there. I couldn't find any when I looked him up on some of his comedic acts. And he was an actor, which we know. We'll cover a lot of different things he did besides Sanford and Son. Let's look who he worked with. These are some guys he worked with early in his career. And I'll have a picture on here for you so you might go, hey, I've heard that name. Maybe you'll put the face to it as well. Milton Berle. We all know Milton Berle. He was huge in that era earlier, even before the 70s. Milton Berle, Danny Kaye, and Henry Youngman. So great musical talents as well as acting talents right there. Comedic. He danced. This is what I love. I love the fact that he danced with Sammy Davis Jr. I want to know where, though. Was it, I don't know if it was live on stage or if it was a musical number. Not sure, but I would guess probably on a live performance, seeing him actually dance with Sammy Davis Jr. That's pretty cool to be with these people. I mean, these are big time names, and Bubba's out there, or Don Bexley's doing that with them. Let's see. Don Bexley, this is a good fact. He was the first black stand-up comedian to work the hotel circuit in Borscht. I think it's called Borscht Belt. It's a Jewish community in New York where it was all a bunch of hotels. He's the first black comedian to ever go there and work that situation, do all that. And it's funny, it'll come back to where black Jewish community later on at the end of this, we have something on what Don Bexley tried to do, which I would have loved to have seen. Unfortunately, he did not live long enough to get that. So we've heard some of the early stuff he's done, some of the people he's worked with. How about this? Don Bexley returned from, oh no, before we get to that, I missed a part. Go back. So he did those other things. He worked with Redd Foxx years ago, years before Sanford and Son. He worked with Redd Foxx in his career in New York, Philly, Baltimore, and also New Jersey. So he did, remember we talked about he was a comedian. He was doing comedic circuits and working with Redd Foxx, where they were building their friendship, which would go on to last for over 40 years, from this point on to the end of Redd Foxx's life. Excuse me. So he got to do that. And when he actually went to Europe, he traveled. So he would do, Don Bexley, you know, back then the real people would, you didn't get so much like exposure to where, hey, I can pull up my phone and look at a comedian in Japan. You know, you had to travel there, and it was good to go to new places to get your name out. It was good to go wherever the act was, wherever the money was, right? So he traveled, he was in Europe, and when he came back from Europe, Redd Foxx was like, hey, he got a hold of him, he said, let's go, we got a movie together, and they starred together in Cotton, I believe it's called Cotton Comes to Harlem. It's cool to see the fact that they were starring together in a movie. So they did Cotton. Now he takes off after that, and now he's in Asia. So man, Don Bexley really got around. I mean, think of all I've only been to a few places outside of the United States, 2 places ever, and to think of some of the places that they traveled early on, to all the places he got to see, that's exciting. So when we're looking at Bubba, the character, and we're going, you know what? He's just like a guy who lives in South Central hanging out, you know, in Watts. Real life, the actual actor, man, he's been everywhere. He's been places I can't even dream of. So that's pretty cool. Don Bexley, when he returns from Asia, that's when Redd hits him up and he says, hey, I got a job for you in Sanford and Son. And that's something we've talked about with Redd Foxx in the past. He really looked out from his friends. And he's such a visionary, right? Pat Morita is Achu, Esther Anderson, you know, Aunt Esther from LaWanda Page, that was him. Julio Fuentes, I had no idea until we were looking that up when I was doing a special on Redd Foxx, that he actually got, his name escapes me now. Why? It's because when the camera's on, your brain, you don't have time to think, so it doesn't pop out. But anyways, Julio, he did not get to, he was part of there because of Redd Foxx, and now Bubba also comes in. There was a handful, a big number of people, but Bubba was in there, and he got him in there, and Redd's like, hey, we're going to get him in there, he's going to work, he's going to play great, and they, instant chemistry because they're already good friends. That's what's smart. Sometimes you see shows where the chemistry's not there, or they force it, or you try to get the odd couple, and it's just like, it doesn't feel natural. But with this, Redd already knew, all these people are friends, they're all people I've worked with. I've worked with Don Bexley many times. I know the timing is great, and I know the character he can pull off. And he comes in, and hats off to Redd for doing this. But Bexley comes in as Bubba Bexley and never misses a beat. He's just like Melvin, but we didn't get enough of. When he's on the screen, instantly, you're smiling. You're smiling because you know at any second he might be like, I want my daddy's. That's the #1 line. Anytime Bubba Bexley is mentioned on our community, on the Sanford and Son page, you know, anything. It's not just our small little thing. You go to any other huge community that might have a clip of Sanford and Son, or the Sanford and Son official channel. Go check them out. They have the best clips around, and in there you will see, as soon as you click on what's something, you'll always find something where somebody says, I want my daddy's records, which is just iconic. They have t-shirts and mugs to this day still on it. That's how big it was. But he got there and he gets them, and then he becomes super popular, and he was a huge, and he still is to this day, a fan favorite. So, and let's talk to a couple of moments that I really love. Share any that you have on here where you say, what's your favorite moment outside of I want my daddy's records? That's like saying, who's your favorite aunt? It's obviously Aunt Esther. What's next? Who would you go next? And so with that, here's a couple of my favorites that were outside of it. I love the one where he says, when he does the judge in the one with Mr. LeDuc with the winning ticket, and it's fake, and he comes down in the judge robe, and he's like, hear ye, you know, I am your Bubba ship. And he sits there and goes, half to Mr. LeDuc, half to this Mrs. Stranger, as he wants to act like he doesn't know who Esther is. So that was one of my all-time favorite ones. And the BB King is just anything with BB King, that episode with him, Esther, Fred, that's to me a top 10 moment of all Sanford and Son scenes. You have to put BB King singing with Fred, Esther, and Bubba as one of the top 10 of all time. So hearing that, Bubba singing, dancing, moving, it's so good. And that's one of my favorite with Bubba. And then the last one of my all-time favorite that make me crack up, right? It's not talked about enough, it's not shown, but I even made a YouTube short recently on it. Go look it up if you haven't seen it yet. Is when they're playing the poker game and with Bottom of the Deck Dan and Rollo and the guy who turns out to be, remember that guy? He was in another episode where he was the disappearing man, where he took off, he got his girlfriend pregnant, Luella, who had the baby when Lamont was out of town. That was the same actor who played it. So maybe Fred kept in touch. Remember, he was the Godfather. They never say his name, so to me, I always say, hey, that's Luella's husband. Fred's still hanging out with them playing poker. But they play poker, and in that one, you see where Bubba, he can't decide, do I risk it? Do I take the card? And they're all, why don't you do the next best thing and fold? And he folds, and then he goes and he's like, can I see that card? I only needed one. Oh, that's the card I need. And then he would have had it. I think he would have had, what was it, a straight or a flush, whatever it was. And then he goes around and Fred wins. And he's like, oh, man. He said, look, I would have beat you. And he said, look, Fred, you believe me? And Fred's like, yeah. And he's all, how much do I take out of this? How much do I take out of this pot? Bubba, that's what I'm saying. When he's on screen, he's so comical just by his appearance. He gives off that big teddy bear, that big friendly guy. You know, everybody sometimes has a friend who's just like this big guy and is just a smile, right? A smile, or it gives you comfort knowing, hey, he's around. And that's what Bubba is. And that's one of my favorite scenes, is the poker scene. So share in the comments below, please. What is your favorite scene? If it is, we know it's I Want My Daddy's Records. It's so good. The best is when him and Fred are toasting and they're like, what do we toast? And he's all, I want my daddy's records. And then he does this big laugh. His laugh is so good. If you ever paid attention, listen to the background on some episodes. Even on ones where Bubba's not in the episode, you will hear when the audience laughs, you will hear that big, ha, 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 the big Bubba laugh. It's him. He's off screen laughing at the actual jokes. Man, I love Bubba. So let's get to what happened after Sanford and Son, after he left. Once he was gone, Don appeared in many more TV shows. We'll cover a few of them. I'm pretty sure he was in a bigger list than this, but these are the bigger ones that I can find that we've heard of. Cheers, we know that. I have a picture of it here where he was on there. You can actually see Norm in the background. Hunter, watched that show in the 80s. I really enjoyed that. I don't remember seeing him on Hunter. Laverne and Shirley, that's an interesting one. I tried looking it up, and I couldn't find the clip. If anyone remembers the episodes from any of these, if you remember from Hunter, if you're a big fan, Laverne and Shirley, not a huge fan. I watched it when it was on, right? Remember, that's back when we had like 10 channels. So you would watch anything that was on that time that was decent. But I don't watch it now like I do Three's Company or Andy Griffith, other older shows. But on that, he was also, like I said, Laverne and Shirley. He guest starred. This was a touching one. In the show, everyone's heard of the Royal Family. If you haven't, go look it up. That is the last series that Redd Foxx ever films. He's with Della Reese. Well, he actually passes away filming that show. Has a real life heart attack, as everyone should know unless you're new to Sanford and Son or Redd Foxx history. Now, once he actually passed away, they had an episode where there was a funeral with him, and Don came on as an old friend who attended Redd Foxx's character on that show's funeral. So that's pretty touching, and that's smart by the people who did the show to say, hey, you know what? Let's pay. From what I've heard behind the scene with Della Reese, that's a whole other issue. You go look at that. It wasn't the nicest things, the way they handled Redd Foxx's passing. But the one thing I could say good was at least they brought in a real friend from his whole, for over half of his life for the last 40 years, and he comes on and he makes an appearance on the show. So I think that's really cool that he got to do that. Now, this is a cool fact. He wrote several scripts. Some of them are done now. I mean, obviously he passed away, but some of them were done after, right before his passing, and they never got produced. They were for TV, and some of the people who proofread them said, hey, this is pretty good. There's just no plans right now in the work to even get produced. I would love to hear if any of them ever do. Well, I'd like to see his name in there, written by something where we see Don Bexley. He had a show. He already had a show in mind after Redd's passing, to where he was the writer and he was going to produce it. And in it, it was called C. Cush Cashman and You Stay Broke. And it's supposed to be. This would have been very interesting. It's supposed to be about a black Jewish man who owns a pawn shop, and Bubba was going to be the guy. That would have been so cool. Just envision that. Bubba having his own pawn shop, and he's got the black Jewish community mixed in him, and man, that could have been great laughs, great stories. And at that time, in the late 80s, or, I think it was early 90s. Yeah, early 90s. That's when you had a lot of great sitcoms coming out like that. And now I can envision that. That would have been great to see. Now we're getting towards the end, so let's get to it. On his personal life, Don had a wife named Sally, right? He had multiple daughters. He had Donna and Stacy Marie. So he's got a wife, had 2 daughters, love that. Had grandkids, so that's awesome right there. I'm a grandparent myself. It's so different than being a parent, but it's still just as incredible. And he had great kids, so he was a great parent. I don't have any great grandkids yet, thank goodness. But yeah, so that's so cool to know that his life was filled with his family, people that were around him, and he was a loving man. Let me get to my closing thoughts on Don Bexley, I'm sorry. This is what I wrote because this is so true. It's an example of he did everything, an example of how to do things right. He went through life doing what he was good at, right? He even openly said as a kid when he wrote about it, I was a clown. He loved the attention. He loved the stage. And you could see it. You could see how great he was. He was built for that. And at an early age, he saw that. And his parents, great family upbringing. Then he was a great parent and a great family man, great husband. And he went, loyal husband, excellent friend. And we saw that with anyone who was in contact with him, especially Redd Foxx. And he was a very hard worker. He was smart. He was intelligent. He can write. He worked his butt off, and he was still doing screenplay. He was still doing things active in his 70s. I mean, it wasn't like he stopped. Remember, he was 60 when Sanford and Son was on. So he lived to be in his 80s, and he was still working hard. Now, the last thing I have to say, I'm sorry, all of it is the last, whatever. To this day, he still, as Bubba Bexley, continues to give laughter and joy to millions of people. Think of the millions of laughs he already gave, and the millions more like us, and hopefully the generations below us will still know what Sanford and Son is. And they're always going to remember Don Bexley as the lovable, fun guy. And when you actually dig in, and if you still at the end of this videos, thank goodness that you listened this far, because there was so much about Don Bexley that I didn't even know. And to hear this, it paints a picture to where now when I watch him, I go, dang, he's even better off screen than he is on screen. And that's what we want from our actors. We don't see that nowadays with a lot of garbage out there. We don't see that. So it's rare. I love it. I never got to meet him, unfortunately, but everything I've read and heard about, I love Don Bexley and I love Bubba Bexley. So thank you for watching. Thanks for sticking around. Don't forget, we'll have more shorts. You're going to have a quiz. Or no, I'm going to do Finish That Line coming up later today. And then we will also have Tuesday episode breakdown. Keep liking, keep subscribing, sharing it to other people. Let's get it out. Let's get this community growing. I love it, and I love doing this, and nothing more than talking about Sanford and Son. So thanks a lot, guys. Talk to you guys later. Say goodbye, Redd. Peace.